Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Hello, so lovely to be with you all.
I am really excited for this conversation. I know that you, the listeners, love talking money. And today we are talking to someone who's going to help us activate that. So, welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. Let's do it. Let's go for
Let's
it.
do it. So, I'm like, there's so many things I want to start with. I want to just know, like, in your life, how did you become this abundance activator?
Very good question. Um, it got me, it found me. I did not find it. I was searching after a lot of trauma and pain when I was in my teens, and I started meditating. And I hated meditation, but I forced myself to do it because I kind of had a sense I was supposed to. And this is when my psychic gifts started waking up. I started receiving messages about my purpose and what I was here to do. What I'm doing now, I saw when I was 18 years old. Got quite confused that I was supposed to be an actress and kind of took down some interesting pathways. But long and short of it, I started working as a healer because I got the message that I was a healer and that was what I was here to do. And I worked very generally as a spiritual coach, as a channel, spiritual mentor. People would come to me for all sorts of issues and problems, very general. And then I started having my own challenges with money. Once I had two little girls, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had been completely neglecting money. And I remember sitting down and being like, what is going on with money and this planet? I said, what is this? I said, I have this big purpose and I want to make a big difference. And I'm not asking for much. I just want organic food and to be able to have holidays. What is going on? And that is when this flood of this new body of work started coming through to me. I started to get downloads and guidance and messages about money, but in a way that I had never even considered before. I was shown this experience with money, a relationship with money that was so beautiful, so heart aligned, soul aligned, stunning, absolutely the opposite of what my money beliefs were. The fact is, I didn't know what my money beliefs were, so it took me on a bit of a journey. But long and short of it, I started working on my relationship with money. I had no idea how much crap I had around money. Because I had completely ignored it, completely neglected it. And about maybe a couple of years after doing my own work around money, and seeing some shifts around it and following this inner guidance around how to manifest money and work on healing my relationship with money, I got the message, the dreaded message, that I was supposed to work with heart-centered business owners, entrepreneurs, change makers, and help them with their relationship with money. My guidance was we needed to get more money into the hands of heart-centered people, people that really are about community and connection and helping life to thrive rather than suffocating life, right? And I said, oh my God, you have got to be kidding me. That is like the worst information I'd ever heard because I had to go through quite a few shifts to be here now. But long and short of it, I made a commitment to follow my inner guidance or at the beginning of this game, so almost 20 years ago now. And I thought, oh my God, I have to listen to this. And then I was guided to create my first program about money and abundance. And I ended up writing a book, Money Manifestation Mastery. And that work has just deepened and strengthened. And I've ended up specializing and becoming known as the Abundance Activator. So that I said that woke up that money work specifically, but it was around 12 years ago now.
That's I'm so excited that you listened to those messages, even though you didn't want to. That is one of the hardest things that I know that I've gone through, plus my clients and the people that I've talked to on this podcast, is we get these beautiful downloads when we choose to listen, and they're so scary,
So
but
scary.
there's so much magic on the other side.
So much magic on the other side, but I 100% understand why people don't listen because it's like you have to face your deepest fears, all your demons, your trauma, your pain. This is also why I love it now because at the core, I'm about healing and transformation, wherever we're focusing. And the other thing, that is, it takes you on your own personal healing and transformation as you're following your guidance for your work. And I love that, the sort of the giving and the receiving of following those voices.
And I think that's another thing that I notice with, spiritual entrepreneurs, healers, the change makers, is that receiving part. We are so wired to give, to give, to give, that that's one of the things, again, one of my struggles. And I've also noticed that I've attracted many people that receiving part, that being in that divine feminine where we're actually willing to open up and receive and say, let's talk about money. Let's get paid for our gifts. Like, more abundant we are, the more abundant we can be to the world, the more impact we can make. So I want to know a little bit, did you ever have that part of your money story?
Oh no, I've always been great at receiving. Oh my God. Yes. I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about helping people. I call it rewire to receive, because I was so bad at receiving. My joke was I was like the world's worst receiver. I could tell you should receive and tell everyone else, of course you have to do that, but just deeply blocked around receiving. So I'm a bit of an energy detective and, in a sense, I guess a problem solver. So when there's a problem and then there's guidance to do the opposite of that problem, it's like, all right, well, why is this so hard? So huge problems with receiving. I could give all day long. I was the healer that, didn't want to charge anything, give my services away for free. I want to help everyone and everything. And I learned the hard way that doesn't work. Doesn't work. I mean, to a degree, but yeah. And it created a huge amount of pain for me that, honestly, it took me quite a long time to pull myself out of that story. And it's still a very deeply ingrained pattern. And I'm all about, trying as best we can to balance it out. Some people need to do the opposite, right? Some people need to get out of their own asses and start thinking more like others. And generosity, that was not me. I needed to do the opposite, right? And a lot of spiritual people, healers, helpers, carers, this is a real money block, like a deep money block.
Oh yeah. I'm like, I laugh and I'm sad at the same time,
Yeah,
because it's
laugh
one
and
of those
cry.
things. It's like I will possibly be working on that money block forever, I feel like, because it's what keeps coming up to the surface. But I want to know, like, so for me, when I was going through this money, like figuring out my money stories, and you said this earlier, was that you didn't even know that there were some of these blocks there. How did you discover some of those blocks that were hidden underneath the surface?
Don't go scratching beneath the surface. I mean, it's incredible to think back now to where I was and how blind I was, like completely blind. But I love going into the deep, dark places we're not supposed to go. So when it's like, don't talk about that, don't go there, that's where I want to go. So I think partly my personality, I'm like a natural born little rebel. But it was simply that I was wanting to, or needing to, we were so broke, bring in more money. But what I was very purpose driven. So I had this sense of purpose. So I was very connected to this vision. And I had pretty simple lifestyle desires. Like at the time, it was I just wanted organic food and to be able to go on holiday and travel and have adventures. So I would say I was starting to play with manifesting. So what is stopping me and blocking me from welcoming in X amount of clients, X amount of money? So I started to understand, because my guidance showed me that there was a block. And in asking the question, I was then shown. And I'm very energetically sensitive and connected. So I see things in visions, and my intuition, I get lots of messages in different ways. So I was literally shown that there was this wall in front of me that was stopping me from receiving. And then I said, well, what is that wall? Why is that there? And it's been, there's lots of, as you know, with these patterns, I call them, money blocks, but it's trauma, right? It's patterns of protection that we've developed. It's where we've been shamed. It's where we've been hurt and harmed, and at a time in our lives, we needed that protection, right? Just to survive or to get by, or as best as we know how, we create and develop these coping strategies at these very important developmental stages, right? When our brain's growing and developing, that informs our whole reality of life and intimacy and connection. what's possible, what's not possible. And so now I see them as very like hardwired neural pathways, and it's all about our nervous system. At the time, I was like, essentially at the root of it, there was probably my first big money block, I would say, was fear of visibility. That was my first big one that I had to meet, which was that I was completely in hiding as a healer. I was terrified of what would happen. Like, I couldn't even say I was a healer at the time. For example, I was in absolute hiding, so much shame, so much fear, like deep-seated persecution fear. It wasn't like, oh, I'm a bit scared of being seen. It was, my whole nervous system was telling me I'm going to die if I do this. So that was my first one, but obviously I understand that money block on a much deeper level now. But yeah, that was the first bit, was like, oh, so in order to make more money, I need to be more visible. In order to make more money, that means I'm going to die. So it was like, not sure I want to do that. Thanks very much.
Yeah, that story, I'm like, that resonates so much with me, because that's part of like my story, is that as the spiritual, I was actually like shunned from church, things like that. So there was this whole like religious, spiritual like warfare that I had going on. And then my family was atheist. So I had this like three-way like thing going on. And I'm like, wow, all right. Well, thank you for coming on. I'm just kidding. But there, I can see this, and I see this pattern now. I can see this pattern in people that I'm working with too. So I'm like, I know where to send everybody. Everyone needs to go visit Lara.
Oh, okay.
But I think this is such an important topic, especially for this healer spiritual realm, especially in this time. Like, it's starting to come out a little bit more. I think that we've had this beautiful last 3 years. I know nobody thinks of it as beautiful, but I think it's really opened our eyes to expand and be more ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I can't believe the shift, because I've been in this game for 25 years, right? I've been in this industry for a long time. And the shift now is unbelievable. Like, what we're talking about in terms of mental health, and like, honestly, it's so different to how it was 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And also I'm different within it, so that's partly it. But yeah, people are a lot more open and receptive. And there's more awareness. I think there's just a lot more awareness, also of problems within that awareness, right? But yeah, like the fact that we can talk about anxiety, and we can talk about depression, and we can talk about trauma, we can talk about therapy, and most people know what meditation and Reiki are now. Like, that was not the case when I started. So that's pretty amazing, I think.
Yeah. So I want to know, in your story, because once you start uncovering these blocks, how did it affect the way that you treated yourself? Like, was there a relationship with self that you were noticing was also playing out in your money story?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, it began. So you mean at the very beginning, like when I was coming from blindness into seeing?
I want to know your whole story. I'm just like, my
Oh
brain is like, this is amazing.
Wait, how long do you have? So I mean, what's interesting to me, just if we backtrack a little bit with my story, is I came from money. I didn't realize I'd come from money until I was about 30 years old. And that to me is super fascinating. Now I know I grew up in like total privilege, white privilege, right, with wealthy people, and we had money. But I did not know that, because there was so much anxiety, lack, scarcity, control patterns that were playing out, which made me feel like we didn't have money. And also, when you're wealthy and you're hanging out with wealthy people, guess what? There's a lot of people are always going to be wealthier than you. So whatever we had, I looked around and just saw, well, there were people that had more. So within the haves, I felt we were like on the lower scale. So I really didn't feel like we had money. So that's just one important thing. But what I realized now was lacking. So there was physical things, not like extravagant by any means, because again, there was a tightness around it. We had a physically very privileged life, but it was, now what I would see was lacking in any kind of love, like at all, like a very deep void of love. So what happened to me was, I first of all completely rejected myself and went into deep, I would say, self-harm, through eating disorders, through drugs, alcohol, making very, unloving choices around sex, and really damaged myself. Really went into this eventually deep depression, horrific relationship with food, and perfectionism. But then started to wake up on my spiritual side, and then I was being shown kind of a way through that. So I went from, starving myself to then becoming like this obsessive. I mean, that I sort of joke now because I was like hardcore, like vegan, like wheat free, sugar free, vegan, like, and I was saying I was the healthiest person, but the most unhealthy person. So that's where I really learned you can be healthy, but really be unhealthy. So my mindset was horrific. So I turned all that, and I turned sort of spirituality and health into like sort of this perfectionism. So now I would really see it all came from the fact that I hated myself, and I felt a deep self-loathing. I felt like a piece of shit. I didn't know this consciously. So I was hustling, pushing, forcing, trying. How can I be more, I don't know, the most spiritual of the spiritual and the healthiest of the healthy? And like, really kind of, but it was all rooted in perfectionism, which was rooted in like not feeling good enough and like a deep space of self-neglect. I understand it all very well now, but at the time I was just sort of like in a bit of a mess, to be honest with you, and felt completely alone, completely isolated. So even when I started waking up spiritually, I felt I really struggled to integrate in life. I would now say highly sensitive, highly traumatized is my new line. Yeah, so that was a little bit how it happened, and having I mean, it's been obviously a journey, but my money journey, I would say, has been a journey into deep self-love and owning
Oh,
my worth, owning my value, coming home to myself, and coming into life.
I'd love to know a little bit more about money and self-love, because that's not something that we normally put together.
No,
And I'm like, I can see it now, the way that you're describing your story and you're taking us on this journey, how it can really be. But for those of, us like me, I'll raise my hand. How is money an act of self-love? Like, how do those go together?
it's a very, very good question. So just to say, the reason why I'm so passionate about this, like, why am I so obsessed about this, is because I didn't, a lot of this stuff I didn't understand consciously. It took me a long time to get it. Just that, like I told you, the fact I grew up in money, but you can have a shitload of money. You can be very wealthy and be miserable, right? And unhappy and abusive and all sorts of stuff. And this is what I think that we see is our financial system is based on a lot of abuse of power, the haves and have-nots. And I think in my heart, I am really passionate about shifting and changing this. And how do we do that? Because we have people who are highly traumatized, shut down, disconnected, creating these financial systems, right? And how do we shift and change that? So we have, for every time when there's a problem in the world and there's issues going on, I'm always like tuning in, like, what do we need to do? The guidance was always start within. Start within. We want to point the finger, we want to blame, but we start within. So if we can make money, but it seemed very much like the money or the version of wealth that I grew up in that was the normal, is there's a certain way of making money that is really about kind of not necessarily listening to yourself, not necessarily listening to your body, not necessarily from a place of self-honoring. So I was like, how do we do this from a different place? How do I, and I will tell you, it's not Lara, the kind of human traumatized version of me, that figured this out. This was coming from my inner guidance. This was coming from my heart, my soul, my inner wisdom that was showing me the way, right? It's an aspect of me that knew, but it was buried in the shadows. So every time I looked at, so I'm trying to bring in X amount of money, what is stopping me or blocking me from welcoming that in? It was never about money. It was never about business. It was never about marketing, right? It was always where there was this deep, like, self-rejection, or an aspect of myself that didn't feel safe, right? That didn't feel held, that would literally hide from money, push away money, block money, feel threatened by money, feel scared of money, feel disgusted by money, all of these things. And I had to learn to turn that around, had to learn how to sort of love money is also loving myself in order to feel safe to welcome it in. So what I find endlessly fascinating about this conversation is that there is how money works on a like a logical, grounded, practical level, all the above board, but there is this huge aspect of the energetics of money that I am now call myself an expert in, that is running everything in the underground of our relationship with money. And if we don't love ourselves, we either welcome money in from a really fucked up, really fucked up way, right? The really unhealthy, hurtful, harmful dynamics with money, or we just can't let it in. You know, we push it out. So this bit of learning to love ourselves is so deep, and I almost find it. I find saying just love yourself or self-love just doesn't even touch the surface of what that really means, right? Because it sounds
Yeah.
good and it sounds even a bit fluffy, but it's such a profound and deep inner space of deeply learning how to deeply love and honor yourself, so that, right, so that you can open up to receive, to allow money to land into your body, allow it to feel safe. Your nervous system feels, you know, safe to receive, which then allows it to land into your business, which then allows it to land into your bank account. Does that make
Yes.
sense what I said? Because like
It
sometimes
makes total sense. To me, it does, because one of like what I've noticed is the more in work you do, like you said, go into those shadows. Like, let's get curious about those stories we don't want to hear, those, you know, that messy trauma, but approach it with a different point of view, with this
yeah.
love, this inner knowing, like, okay, I survived this. Let's look at what I've learned. Let's get curious. How can I bring this forward and
Yeah.
release that wall? Take that wall down that you were talking about, brick by brick. Let's take it down.
And particularly for like for me, the shadow in this spiritual community is the unaddressed trauma. And this is what I've really seen. I've been in this industry for a long time, so I'm a little bit cynical because I've seen a lot of BS, right, in the
Yeah.
spiritual wellness industry. And why I love working with money is because you can't bypass like the facts of money, right? It really grounds us into what's actually here. So I was the worst perpetrator of this, of like love and light and like peace and love, but like just don't touch that bit of my trauma, right? Like, or, you know, for me, I would just like freeze and withdraw. Like my trauma response was just to like go into paralyzing fear, like freeze and hiding. So like flight, sorry, rather than fight. Um, and we need to be an integrated human being. So I am very psychic. I can tap into, I mean, I've been on lots of very exciting adventures in the cosmos and back again. But at the end of the day, we are human beings having a human experience, right? So I was like very wealthy spiritually, I would say, and poor physically. And there was an absolute relationship between my financial reality and how safe I felt in the world as a human with other humans, right? How safe I felt being me, all of me in the world. And this is what's so interesting, because we need to bridge. We can't just, we see it. Like I've had so many beautiful clients who are deeply spiritual, so generous, but they're not grounded. They're not in the world. So that's when it becomes dangerous. And that's when you see like crazy conspiracy theories going around and all this nuts stuff, because there aren't any roots. We have to integrate land ground. And this is always my message. How do we integrate all this spiritual information? How do we integrate all this stuff in a way that's actually digestible and usable and grounded? And this is why I love business, and this is why I love money, because this, we need to find a way to like grow the roots. It's like the seed of consciousness, putting it in the ground, growing the roots, and starting to materialize this wealth of information that's actually usable. So this is, as you can probably hear, my passion of why it's so important that we do this work.
Yes. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things I have to work on. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I know my listeners are going to appreciate this. And that's that grounding piece.
Yeah.
Like every time you say something, my mind is like, dink, I can think of like 10 different things that have popped up in the last 2 weeks that are like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, look, all this ungroundedness. look at all my ungroundedness, look at the outward. Cause I feel like sometimes we pick up on the world what we need to work on sometimes for ourselves.
100%. That's why it triggers us, because it's like, oh shit, where does this live? My question is, where does this live within me, right? Where does this live within me? And we don't want to look at that because it's ugly. We have to. So money work for me is shadow work. Money work for me is trauma work, right? Because we are in a really traumatized society, and our financial system is, it's like, for me, it's like when you're highly sensitive, trying to, because what was happening, I was being guided. My guidance said, Lara, you have to play the game to change the game. Right? You can't just sit there from, like, on the top of the mountain with your light channeling and all that stuff and expect change to happen. So you got to get in the game, girl. And I was like, but it feels so bad to me as a highly sensitive, right? And what I've understood is because it was living within my nervous system, right? This all lives within us. We're not separate, really, ultimately, at the end of the day. So we have to get resilient. I think it takes crazy courage to do this money work. I think we need powerful vision. We need a strong why. I needed a very strong, like, why the heck am I going to face all of this horrible pain? Why am I going to do that? Why are you asking me to face my deepest fears and my deepest insecurities and my deepest shame and pain? Why on earth would I do that? I need to know that there is, like, a good reason. And I found that there always is a good reason, even though the ego will be like, don't go anywhere near that. Right? Our self-protection. But I also think then if we can get more resilient and more courageous and do the inner work, right, we can be stronger leaders and hold stronger space for other people who also have to do that work, because we all need to do a lot of healing, a lot of transformational work. And so that's what I see is, like, the gift is, okay, right? If we can, like, I've faced so many demons and so much fear, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm still alive. Like, that didn't kill me. That's amazing. Maybe, just maybe, I'm safe to receive.
Yeah. I call those my evidence files. I have a book that I put all my evidence files in of, like, I made it over that. I could do it again.
Exactly. So you got data. I call that the hard data. Is like, oh, remember when we did that? And remember we didn't die? You thought you were going to die and you're still alive. And now it's like, some of my deepest fears of money is like, if I have money, I'm going to be alone. If I have money, I'm going to be hated. If I'm going to be money, I'm going to be judged. So it'd be like, yeah, that might happen a bit, but what's actually happened is the opposite, right? There's more love, more connection, more support, more, success in my business. But, like, in a way, that's not really what motivates me. It's like all the things my heart has really longed for that I didn't even realize was a thing. I didn't even know some of this stuff that's manifested in my life now. I didn't even know was a possibility, right? And they're like, oh, I transformed that money block and I have more love in my life. I have deeper friendships. Feel more support. I feel safer. I have no visibility fears anymore. Like, oh, So every time I hit up against the next one, because, by the way, this work never stops, right? I'm always working on my money game. And it's always like, shit, every time you hit that next level, it's like, remember, Laura, remember? Okay, let's just face this fear and see what happens.
Yes. And I think one of the things you keep saying is the word support. And I think that is one of the reasons for me why I like to either get in some sort of community, hire a coach, do something. And I know that you have a free 5-day wealth retreat coming up that would really support somebody who's like, if they're getting pings, like I'm getting pings, like this would be a great way to get, like, into your space and be supported through some of this. Can you tell us a little bit about that retreat that's coming up?
I would love to. And yeah, I've run this retreat enough times now that I can say it is absolutely stunning and gorgeous. And the transformations that take place is beautiful. Amazing testimonials, people who've, like, doubled their business, manifesting 8 grand in 3 days, like, really powerful stuff happens. Or there's the possibility if we're open and receptive to it. So the first thing is the network. I do attract in beautiful hearts and souls, people who got big, I call, big hearts, big purpose, who want to make big money, even if it terrifies you. So the community is gorgeous. It's a safe place to really show up in all that you are, to be celebrated in all that you are, to be held. So I'm a big advocate for owning our vulnerability, because if we need to integrate, the kind of as above, so below, so to speak, or the light and the shadow, we also need to own and hold the vulnerable parts of ourselves. So it's a beautiful space. We get really clear on your heart, soul, body aligned money vision and why, like what that is, like your purpose. So this is about bringing in your work. We get really clear on your money blocks, what is stopping you or blocking you. And again, I'm all about safety and support, because that is what I've learned. That's what we need to really do deep, integrative transformation work. I'm going to teach you my powerful manifestation hacks and how to integrate, how to welcome what you're calling into your body, business, bank account. I take you on a powerful activation to help you to, I call it rewire to receive. We need to get your whole nervous system on board, your whole energetic system, because you on one level might think, yeah, like that's great, but it needs to be integrated and really help you to step in. I call it the step into the next level of your purpose, power, and prosperity, and teach you how to be led by your wealth, by your inner wealth, rather than by your lack, fear, scarcity, not enough version of you. So that's really what we do. And we step into this beautiful portal for 5 days, super high frequency, powerful container that if you just step in, it starts to shift and move and change and transform you. Right. If you show up, if you lean in, if you're like, okay, let's try this. Yeah, so that's what we'll be doing.
And where can they find that? I'll also put it in the show notes, but can you tell us where we can find it?
Yeah, so the link to sign up, by the way, it's 100% for free. And the link is on my website. It's larawaldman.com. And there is a little click on the Wealth Retreat button. Just put your name in and you'll get your beautiful place just for you to come and join us.
I love that. I know I signed up, so I hope to see all of you listeners in there too. Maybe we can actually see each other and support each other on another level. And I just like this. It's so amazing to me as I keep going deeper with this podcast of how important and how our business is so directly related to love, to our money stories, to all of these different things. When I started this podcast, I had a download one morning and I launched my podcast the same day.
Wow.
And in like 8 months, we ranked number 52 in the top self-love podcasts. I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from. I'm a business girl. I have a master's degree in business. Like I'm all business. I'm like, why self-love? But it's conversations like this that pull this podcast all together. This is why we're talking business and love, money and love. It's all this big, it comes back to self and that inner work. And I love your story and how you leaned in from meditating, really young, hating it. There's hope. There's hope for all my meditation haters out there.
Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah, one step at a time. It can be really overwhelming, right? Because I'm all about bridging the gap between where you are now and where you want to be, and that's what I help you like with the money manifestation work. But please just breathe into the now and the moment, because as you said, like actually, if we can really surrender, so much can happen, so much can land in. I don't think faster is better. I think we're in a really fast food culture, and I think that's part of the problem. We want results now. Some things just simply take time, but equally, there's some things that are ready and available to you right here, right now, if you're willing to get out of the way, open up and listen. And it's a bit like diving, probably out of an airplane sometimes. I can feel like that. And if you're a recovering perfectionist like me, like you have to be willing to fail, get things wrong, to fall. It's gonna hurt. And like I see a lot of pain avoidance in human beings, natural, understandable. We want to avoid pain, but part of this path is learning to like work with pain really consciously and mindfully, and then we find doors can start to open, which is beautiful and makes it all worthwhile.
So if someone were to walk away with just that one little mic drop heart nugget, what would you want that to be?
Oh, so the wealth that you are seeking, the wealth that you are looking for, wanting, right, and feeling the lack of, lives within you. I call it your wealth cave within. And yes, we co-create with all of life. So you're not an island, right? We need each other, and there's things that could definitely come from outside as well. But the activation of your money game starts within. It's very hard. Like our eyes, everything focuses out. We project outwards all the time. Your journey into money starts within, starts deep in your belly, that wealth cave within. So like all answers start within. It doesn't mean every solution is within, but it's the like I would say in terms of external results, it's about 80% inner game as a minimum from my